She wasn't breathing right, her pulse was fading again, and the father, Michael Caine, just collapsed to his knees, whispering, "Please, not again." Then, through the ICU doors where no one's allowed, a barefoot, dirt-covered boy walks in. No name tag, no permission, no explanation. The head nurse shouts. A security guard lunges, but the boy, he just raises a hand and gently places it on the girl's forehead. And then he speaks. 5 words. "Sir, I can wake her up." In that room full of science, it wasn't medicine that turned her hand warm again. It was something else, something no one, not even the billionaire father, saw coming. The boy's hand was still on her forehead. No one moved. Then the doctors laughed. Not out loud, not at first, but in that quiet, professional kind of way. The kind that says, "We've seen everything. And this is nonsense." One leaned over to the nurse and whispered, "He's delusional, probably off his meds." Security stepped forward, hand already on the radio. "Kid, you're trespassing. 1 more second and you're under arrest." The hospital director, summoned from the executive wing, stormed into the room and stared in disbelief. "This is a level 1 breach," he barked. "How did a street kid even get into the ICU?" Michael Caine, the grieving father, now stood back up, his suit still crisp, his face stained with tears. He looked down at the boy with fire in his eyes. "What kind of joke is this?" he said. "Who let this child near my daughter?" But Jaden didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't run. He just stood there, small, filthy, 10 years old, from East Baltimore. A kid who slept under tarp in an abandoned warehouse. A boy who'd been in and out of shelters, marked as unstable by every caseworker who met him. They'd written him off long ago. But right now, the whole world was watching. Because someone had started a live stream, a nurse, maybe, or a visitor, and the video was already exploding across social media. Over 30,000 viewers in minutes. "Who is this kid?" one comment read. Another, "Someone call CPS, this is child abuse." But most were laughing. Crackhead prophet, Baltimore Jesus, Skid Row Messiah. No one believed him. Not the doctors, not the public, not even the man who'd begged the universe to save his daughter just moments before. And still, Jaden stood there, calm, silent, his hand still resting on the girl's forehead, like he knew something they didn't. Jaden didn't speak. He didn't move. His hand still rested gently on the girl's forehead as chaos simmered around him. But this boy, this barefoot stranger in the ICU, he had already lived more loss than most could imagine. He was 6 when it happened. His mother had collapsed on the sidewalk outside their apartment. A seizure. She'd had epilepsy for years, but Medicaid had denied her medication again and again. Too many forms, too many delays, too many people who looked the other way because she was just another poor woman in East Baltimore. Jaden held her hand the entire time, watched her convulse, watched her eyes roll back, watched her stop. No ambulance came in time, no follow-up, no lawsuit, no apology. By the next day, he was a ward of the street. At first, he wandered, alley to alley, shelter to shelter. But he never drifted far from one place, the University of Maryland Hospital. Not because they helped him. They didn't. But because there, he could watch. He'd sit outside the loading dock, under the steam vents, and listen to the doctors talk. He'd press his face to the glass near the outpatient unit and watch the patients. He started to notice patterns. Who seized before the rain came, who twitched when the fluorescents buzzed, who came in walking and left in silence. That's when he met Dr. Solomon Weathers, a retired neurobiologist with a cane, a fading memory, and a soft spot for curious minds. He caught Jaden mimicking brain scans with chalk on the sidewalk, and instead of calling the police, he brought him books. Old ones. Frayed pages, notes in the margins, neuroscience journals, anatomy guides, faded MRI printouts. Jaden devoured them. Not because he had a classroom, because he had a mission. He'd seen the system fail before. He'd watched the world walk past his mother's body. He'd heard it over and over again. We don't help nobodies. But now he was standing inside one of the most advanced hospitals in the country. His palm on the forehead of a girl that no one else could reach. And deep down, in a place no machine could scan, Jaden knew what he was feeling. The sparks, the rhythms, the silent signals that flickered beneath skin and skull. He didn't learn that from school. He learned it from watching The Forgotten. He learned it because no one else ever would. The room was still vibrating with doubt, doctors shifting on their heels, security tightening their grip on the radios, The hospital director whispering furiously into a phone. But Jaden, he didn't move, didn't shrink, didn't apologize for being there. Instead, he turned, slowly, and looked Michael Caine straight in the eyes. A boy from the streets, facing down a billionaire in a $3,000 suit. And then he said it, clear, calm, certain. Her brain's not gone, she's listening. You're just not saying the right words. The words sliced through the tension like a blade. Caine blinked. The room froze. One of the nurses scoffed under her breath. A resident muttered, "What does he know?" But Jaden didn't flinch. He stepped forward, just one small step, and kept his eyes on the man who held all the power. "Give me one chance," he said. "Let me talk to her. Just me. 1 minute. You can watch. You don't even have to leave." The silence that followed was thick, like the whole ICU had forgotten how to breathe. Someone coughed, someone whispered, "Absolutely not." But Caine, he didn't speak. He just stared at the boy. The hand, the eyes, the calm that made no sense. This kid wasn't asking for money, wasn't asking for fame, wasn't even afraid. He just knew. And finally, with the weight of 1,000 sleepless nights behind his voice, Caine said just 2 words, "Do it." The room erupted. "No way. This is insane. Sir, we can't allow this." But Caine didn't look away. Not from Jaden. Not from his daughter. He raised his hand and shut them all down. "Give the boy 60 seconds, he said. "Then you can throw him out." The hospital director looked like he might explode. But rules were already broken. The live stream was already viral. And something in the air had changed. For the first time that night, Jaden wasn't being dismissed. He was being heard. Jaden stepped closer to the bed. The beeping of the monitors seemed to soften, as if the room itself were listening now. He didn't touch her again. He just stood at her side, eyes calm, voice steady. And then he spoke. Not to impress, not to prove anyone wrong, just to explain. When her finger moved, he said, that wasn't random. It wasn't a muscle spasm. It was a reflex, a neural echo. The kind that doesn't show up on your charts unless you know what to look for. A resident crossed his arms. One of the doctors raised an eyebrow. Jaden didn't pause. He gestured gently toward the girl's hand. Her pinky flexed inward. Slightly. That's not a seizure twitch. It's something called peripheral feedback mirroring, a reaction loop I read about in a 1996 study. One Dr. Weathers gave me. It only shows up in cases of misclassified brain injuries. The lead neurologist scoffed. And what, you think she's not in a coma? Jaden turned to him, still calm. I think you're trying to treat a misdiagnosed coma, he said. She's not unconscious, she's trapped. This is locked-in syndrome. The words hit like a bolt. Locked-in syndrome. A condition so rare, most physicians only read about it once in med school, if at all. Brain fully awake, body completely paralyzed, no speech, no movement, no way to signal for help. Except maybe a single twitch. The room went tense again. Another doctor snorted. That's impossible. Her scans were clear. Jaden nodded. Clear according to your protocol, your assumptions. He gestured to the machines. You're waiting for textbook symptoms, but this girl hasn't read your textbooks. She's trying to scream from inside and you're not listening, just like no one listened to my mom when she begged for meds. A hush fell. Caine swallowed hard. One of the nurses, the quiet one, stepped forward, whispering to the EEG tech. Within seconds, the screen flickered. Tiny waves, faint but present, response activity. The neurologist leaned in. Run it again. Same result. Spike, spike. Only when Jaden spoke, only when his voice filled the room. He wasn't just guessing. He was right. The girl was still in there. The EEG spikes didn't lie. They were faint, but they were real. The kind of signals you only see when the mind is present, even if the body is silent. For a moment, the entire room just stood still. Then, one by one, the professionals who had scoffed at Jaden's words began pulling up charts, scrolling through digital logs, and reviewing days, weeks, months of neural scans. And suddenly, things didn't look so certain anymore. A junior neurosurgeon was the first to say it out loud. There's a lag pattern here. It could support a LIS diagnosis. Another chimed in. Motor cortex is low, but look at the prefrontal response. Whispers turned into tension, tension into silence, silence into shame. Because the boy, the homeless boy who came in with no badge, no credentials, and no permission, had just exposed a failure in the very heart of the institution. Michael Caine stood back, watching. His jaw tightened. Then he turned to the hospital director, voice like steel. Reevaluate everything, he said. Today, right now. And just as the machines began their new battery of tests, a nurse brought over something even more damning, a clip from the live stream. The moment when Jaden leaned close to the girl's ear and said, "She remembers the Christmas tree." 5 words, spoken quietly, softly, but they struck like thunder. Because no one outside Kane's family could have known that. Not about the ceramic angel on top, not about the song they played every year while decorating. Not about the time Emily, just 6 years old, had insisted on hanging the lights herself and electrocuted the whole string. Tears welled in Kane's eyes. Doctors exchanged glances. This was no lucky guess. And then it happened. Her eyelid fluttered, once, then again. A sharp gasp broke from the nurse beside her. Someone whispered, "Did you see that?" Then slowly, impossibly, Emily's eyes opened. The machine spiked. Kane fell backward into a chair, hands to his mouth. Gasps turned into cries, shock into awe. And Jaden? He just stood there, silent, still. The system had spoken. And it was wrong. All this time they'd missed what a boy with nothing saw in seconds. The truth wasn't in their machines. It was in the quiet signs they were trained to overlook. The tiny movements, the unheard voices, the people the system called invisible. But not anymore. The next morning the press was already camped outside Johns Hopkins. Not because of a new medical breakthrough. Not because of a press conference. But because of a boy, once homeless, who walked through a hospital's doors and changed everything. Inside, a different kind of meeting was unfolding. The hospital board of directors, rattled and raw, gathered in private chambers. What began as an emergency review quickly turned into something else. A reckoning. One by one, the facts were laid bare. The misdiagnosis, the ignored twitch, the arrogant dismissal of a child who had nothing but intuition, compassion, and the knowledge passed down from an old mentor. And then came the verdict, a public apology, drafted, signed, broadcast live by every major network. "We failed," it read. "We failed a patient. We failed a family. And we failed a boy who saw what our systems could not." But it wasn't just paper. Real consequences followed. Dr. Ramirez, the hospital's lead neurosurgeon, stood before the cameras with visible emotion. "We relied too heavily on our charts, our screens. We forgot to see the human beneath the data." His voice cracked. "We owe Jaden more than words." And Jaden? He stood quietly beside them, wearing borrowed clothes and shoes a size too big. Not with arrogance, not with bitterness, but with that same stillness, the kind born not from pride, but from pain. When the questions came, "Who are you? How did you know? Where did you learn this?" he simply said, "Sometimes the ones no one listens to hear everything." Johns Hopkins announced that same day, Jaden would be given a full academic scholarship, housing, tutoring, a path into the medical field. He didn't have to audition. He'd already passed the test the world wasn't ready for. But the story didn't stop there. Michael Caine, once untouchable, once a symbol of polished power, stood in front of a podium and did something few billionaires ever do. He stepped down, temporarily removed himself from EtherCore, citing a failure of vision, both personal and systemic. And then he made an announcement no one expected. He would be launching the Angela Caine Foundation, named after Jaden's late mother. Its mission, to provide life-saving care to uninsured families who'd been denied help, just like her, just like Jaden. "I can't bring back the woman who raised this boy," Caine said, voice trembling. "But I can make damn sure no one else's mother is left to die waiting for paperwork." In that moment, the story wasn't about a hospital scandal. It wasn't about one miracle or one misdiagnosis. It was about a system exposed, an underdog finally heard, and a truth that echoed far beyond those sterile white walls. Sometimes, it takes the smallest voice to remind us what healing really means. The machines no longer screamed in sterile tones. Now they hummed quietly, rhythmically, like a lullaby of life slowly returning. Sunlight filtered through the blinds and soft gold streaks as Jaden stepped into the ICU again. But this time, no security blocked his path. No whispers followed him. No scoffs, no stares, only silence. A different kind of silence, one carved out of respect. Emily lay there, eyes open now, no longer motionless. She couldn't speak much yet. But when she saw him, her lips quivered. A small breath escaped her. And then, barely audible, she whispered, "Thank you for coming back." Jaden froze. Not out of fear, but out of something deeper. A grief that had nowhere to go for years, now finally seen. He nodded once and then stepped forward. Their hug was quiet, gentle, more like a reunion of two souls who had never met, yet somehow always knew each other. Behind them, Michael Caine stood motionless, no longer the CEO. Not in that moment, just a father, watching the boy who had saved his daughter when no one else could. His eyes brimmed. No cameras this time. No podium, just the weight of it all catching up to him. Jaden whispered something as he stepped back, his voice soft, matter-of-fact. "I just didn't want her to end up like my mom." A beat. Then, alone. That was all he ever wanted. Not fame, not forgiveness, just one girl to be heard, the way his mother never was. And in that moment, no degree, no diagnosis, no donation could ever mean more. Jaden wasn't a miracle. He didn't walk on water. He didn't wave a wand. He didn't break the laws of science. He understood something deeper than most professionals ever ask themselves. That healing doesn't always begin in a lab. Sometimes it starts when someone finally listens. He was never supposed to be in that hospital. Not by the rules, not by the resume. But the truth is, Jaden wasn't a miracle. He was a mirror. A mirror held up to a system that prides itself on progress, but forgets the people it was built to serve. For every Jaden we finally hear, how many do we still ignore? How many children sleeping in shelters tonight could recognize what a team of doctors missed? How many voices do we silence simply because they're too young, too poor, too different, too unqualified to matter? Jaden's story didn't end with applause. It ended with a question. Next time, are you going to listen? Because in the US right now, more than 40,000 people live with disorders of consciousness. Nearly 1 in 5 comas are misdiagnosed due to limited testing or misinterpreted signs. And over 30 million Americans still lack access to affordable, reliable health care. Not because the technology isn't there, but because compassion isn't in the protocol. Jaden was never meant to be the hero, but he became something greater, a reminder that when institutions fail to see, the smallest voice can become a revolution. So ask yourself, when the next Jaden walks in, will we shut the door or finally let him speak? Because the next life saved might depend on your answer. If this story moved something in you, don't let it stop here. Share it. Not for the likes, not for the clicks, but for the millions of voices still being ignored today. For the children sleeping in shelters with minds no one tests. For the patients misdiagnosed because their stories don't fit the chart. For the parents holding on to hope, alone in a room full of machines. Jaden's story is one of a kind, but his silence, his struggle, his dismissal, that happens every single day. So don't scroll past. Stand still, reflect, remember. Because this was never just about one boy and one girl in a hospital bed. It was about all of us. It was about what we see, what we refuse to see, and what changes when we finally open our ears to the unheard. So if you're still here, still listening, subscribe. Not for me, for them. For more stories where truth breaks through the noise and light cuts through the cracks of a broken system. Let's not wait for another Jaden to wake us up. Let's be the ones who stay awake.